So while I source a water pump for the FC, I've really got to get started on the rotor and pad replacement on the FD. Track day is now only a few days away and I've probably left this to the last minute. So before you get started, make sure you've got the right tools for the job. I learned the hard way and it took me much longer to do one side than it should have. So I've still got this side to do, and I've got the right tools, and I'll step you through how I managed to do it so you don't follow the same mistakes I made. So to get the caliper off, you're going to need a 17mm socket and breaker bar, and of course a 17mm spanner to take the bolts right out. You'll need an 8mm spanner to loosen the bleed nipple, and an old flathead screwdriver with a bit of length to push the pistons back into their place, a clamp to hold the rotor down, and what would have to be the two most important tools if you want a headache-free removal, an FBH and an impact driver. These two tools really make a difference, so if you don't have any before starting, I recommend going out and getting some now. And a rubber mallet to help remove the disc once everything's undone. Okay, so before you get any further, what I recommend you do now is try to get these two bolts here and here loose. If you're not going to get these loose, there's not much point continuing from here, so save yourself some headache and don't worry about taking the caliper off yet. So get yourself your impact driver and FBH ready and let's see if they come out. Right, so the way that this impact driver works is you hit this end, and as long as you've got the correct calibration set up, it will force the screw in the direction you've got it. So to change the direction, you push in and turn. So this is now on the tightening setting. Push in, turn to the left. It's now going to be undoing. So as you hit it, you want to apply a bit of pressure in the direction you want the screw to go. And you don't have to go too overboard. What's the bet the car alarm goes off? So as you can see, while I hit, the disc was turning in the direction of the screw. So you want to grab your clamp and clamp the back of the heat shield to your disc. I'm not too worried about the surface of these discs because I walk anyway. If you are worried, you could possibly put a bit of cardboard or wood or something in there. So I'll just clamp that down to hold it in place. Alright, let's try again. Here we go, first one's loose. On to the second. Right, this one's been a little bit more stubborn, and the head on this impact driver is actually chewing into the head of the screw. But we'll keep going. You can see how people break these tools off. This is twisted and warped just from those few hits. So I swapped it out for a flathead and we'll try again. Oh man. Another one bites the dust. So plan B consists of drill and drill bit. It's debatable whether you actually need these anyway. The 180 that I've got doesn't have them, it has a floating disc. I managed to do it on the other side okay, and I reused those screws. I think I'll use one of them, but I'm not too fussed about having either of them, to be honest. So while you drill, I recommend using a bit of CRC or other sort of lubricant to prevent your drill bit from burning out. Right, so the screw head's come loose from its thread, but it's refusing to come out. So what we'll do is we'll take the caliper off now, remove the disc, and this should just fall out. Now there's two bolts back here holding the caliper onto the bracket. Make sure you turn it the right way. Obviously it's in reverse because the bolt's head's facing away from you, so just bear that in mind. And then once you've got them loose, you can go and use your ratchet spanner. Now before you take the caliper off completely, it's a good idea to take the pads out first. Then you can loosen the bleed nipple, push the pistons back into their spots, which will just give you a bit more wiggle room when you're putting your new pads on, which are obviously a bit meatier than the old. So to pull the pads out, you need to remove these 3 wires that hold the pads in place. Start with the one at the back. Take note of how these are orientated, saves you a bit of hassle later on. Remember, the small one goes at the top, the big one goes at the bottom. Alright, so these pads should slide out with a bit of encouragement. There we go. Okay, so now we've got access to the pistons. What you want to do now is just find your bleed nipple. It should be at the top, maybe covered. And then a rubber bung, the other side didn't. You just want to loosen that off with your 8mm. Not too much, but just enough so that it sprays fluid out when you push these pistons back. It'll make your life a lot easier. Alright, so that's loosened off. Grab your old flathead. Now there's a few ways of doing this, but the way I did it was just using this one piece, this one tool. So put the head against the piston and the arm of the tool against the disc and push. Probably need to loosen this off just a little bit more. And presto! Alright, I've made a bit of a mess of the wheel well, but we'll tidy that up later. Just make sure to tighten up your bleed nipple again. You don't want to forget about that later on. Okay, then you can continue to remove your brake caliper. Alright, take the clamp off, and all going well, the disc should come off with a bit of encouragement. This is where your rubber mallet comes in handy. So this last bit of the head was causing a little bit of resistance, but a couple solid whacks and she flew off. And off she comes. Alright, so I didn't get anything fancy, just basically a good set of replacement rotors. If your supplier's any good, they'll come with instructions, but if they don't, the gist of it is make sure you use brake cleaner on both front and back surfaces, just to get rid of any oils and grease that may reside from being in storage. Let that dry or towel dry it off, and then install it without touching it with your fingers. So we'll do that right now. Now I don't trust my rag, so I'm going to let that air dry for a few minutes and put it on later. So once your disc's dried off, it's basically a reverse of taking them off. Just be careful not to touch the braking surface with your dirty hands. Okay, so that's all tightened back up again. Like the discs, the pads I didn't go overboard on. I've used the Mintex brand before. I don't know, I wasn't too impressed with them earlier, but I'll give them a second shot. I had these on the 180 and ended up cracking them, but it could have been a bad batch, so we'll see how these go. And like the rotors, try to avoid touching the surface with your fingers. Alright, and onto the fiddly little wire brackets. These little extended pieces go on the top of the brake pads, and the big one goes at the bottom. Alright, we would have lost a little bit of brake fluid, so it's a good idea to just to top it up, of course. May need to bleed it, but we'll see if we can get away with it first. So both sides are now done. Next step is to bed in the pads.